Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. My name is Michael Ween. It's Thursday, October 17th, 10:15 p.m. Central Time here in Houston, Texas. We are back continuing our 2024-2025 college basketball team previews, and today we will be talking about the Duke Blue Devils, one of the blue bloods of college basketball going into year 3 of John Shire. If you like what we do here, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Support our algorithm. It helps our algorithm. Leave a like on our videos. We greatly appreciate that. We really do appreciate all of your support. And go check out our Patreon. It is free of charge. We post over there about once a month, pretty infrequently, but we have a ton of content through football season, going into basketball season. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. And tell your friends about it. If you have friends that like sports, tell them to give it a try. We greatly appreciate that as well. Before we get into Duke, my co-host is joining me from Austin, Texas, Mr. Emmy Nixon. What is up?
Nothing much, man. We've had some technical difficulties tonight, so I'm not going to ramble on too long. Let's just get into this thing.
Yes, so the Duke Blue Devils finished with the same record in year 2 under John Shire that they did in year 1 under John Shire at 27-9. They made strides by reaching the Elite Eight after flaming out in the second round of the NCAA tournament during Shire's his debut campaign. So Elite Eight appearance last year, 27-9, and I believe that John Shire brings back his most hyped team into his 3rd season as the replacement for the legendary Coach K, also known as Mike Krzyzewski. He's got the nation's #1 recruiting class coming in, and that includes freshman phenom Cooper Flagg, amongst a ton of other 5-stars. It's a 6-man freshman class. He's got a couple returning players who we'll talk about. And then some good transfers, a good transfer haul as well, as he's had to kind of retool this roster. So, Emmy, give me your overall initial thoughts on Duke going into this season.
Well, for one, this team isn't a typical group of just like it's not a typical freshman-laden team, so to speak. It's a group of, I think, very mature players coming in, and that goes for the freshmen and the transfers as well. And they also have returning talent a little bit as well, sprinkled in. So it's a combination of all those things, and, I mean, they're just supremely talented, like, no doubt about it. Even if they come out sloppy at the start of the year, we're confident they'll figure things out.
Yeah, so what did Duke bring in via the transfer portal? Well, they brought in a sizable guard transfer from Tulane, 6'6" grad transfer guard, Sion James. He's kind of the type, in my opinion, he's just a savvy veteran addition that can help hold an otherwise young roster together. And he's averaged 38% from 3 during his career. He's got experience, and he'll be a good perimeter defender as a guard. He'll kind of help Caleb Foster, who's a young sophomore that they need to develop on that end of the floor. I think he'll play more of a bench role. They bring in Mason Gillis, who's done a ton of winning at Purdue. He's also a grad transfer. He's just a high caliber winner, role player, and he comes in as a 6-year player, 5 seasons at Purdue, and he'll give you the kind of veteran leadership and excellent floor spacing, as he's also a pretty good shooter from outside. And then they bring in Malik Brown, who's a junior transfer from Syracuse. He was ranked as Syracuse's top overall player last year on KenPom. And so I think the fact that he also thrives on the defensive end, he was ACC All-Defensive honors as a sophomore. That'll help Duke. And now, with the versatility of Gillis and Brown, they can go to some pretty small lineups and versatile lineups with Cooper Flagg. So overall, you're not blown away with the numbers that these guys put up at their previous schools, but I think their program fits. They give experience. They're all really good defensively, and they all have different skill sets, and a couple of them are floor spacers. So overall, I give this Duke transfer portal class a B+. I think it's really solid.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in terms of their transfers, I mean, you mentioned the, I guess, lower numbers than maybe you would hope for in some ways, but I think, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I think just what Malik Brown, for example, his ideal fit is what he's going to give them on the defensive end of the floor. As I mentioned, they might not get the offensive punch from him, although he is a junior. You hope he take a step up in that department. I think he's going to start, though. And he was ACC All-Defense last year. I think just putting a guy like that who's 6'9", and can take some of the pressure off a freshman in Cooper Flagg defensively is a good get, and it's a fit. And then you have guys like Mason Gillis and Sion James leading your bench unit, guys that have won at other programs. James being a good three-point shooter, averaged over 14 points per game at Tulane last year. And then Mason Gillis, who's just kind of that glue guy. Veteran leadership, excellent floor spacing. He can play the 3 or the 4. He can guard multiple positions. It's a really good class. And when you combine it with what John Shire did in recruiting to not only get Cooper Flagg, who I'm sure we can talk about all day if we wanted to, but to bring in a guy like Kaman Mulawik, I think is how you say his name, 7'2", 250 freshman center. To get a guy like Con Knuppel, who will be a floor spacer off the bench, and he's a highly rated guy, right? I mean, you're replacing guys like Jeremy Roach and Jared McCain, guys who were good shooters, timely shot makers of the ball last year for this Duke team. Each of those guys shot 41% from 3 or better last year. And last year, Duke was 15th nationally at 37.7%. So a guy like Con Knuppel, I think, is going to be an X factor for them. I think he'll seek a niche on the bench as kind of like another shooter on this team. And I think what John Shire tried to do with this roster is he tried to maintain the perimeter shooting that he had a year ago. Con Knuppel off the bench, and then the obvious X factor for this Duke team this year is going to be junior returning guard Tyrese Proctor, who didn't really have the breakout season that we were looking for last year. And it was really kind of cemented by the fact that he really struggled in that Elite Eight game against NC State, where he went 0 for 9 in their Elite Eight loss. But he showed signs of progress last year. He improved his assist-to-turnover ratio. He upped his shooting percentages. And so with Jeremy Roach gone, Proctor is going to have to take on a leadership role. He's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. And he's going to have to take on more of a scoring role as well. So big X factor is Tyrese Proctor at the point guard position, especially with some of the freshmen that are going to be getting minutes. And I think a guy like Con Knuppel, even more so than maybe a Cooper Flagg, is a big-time X factor just from the shooting that I think he's expected to give them immediately off the bench. For these freshmen, it's all about what value can you provide immediately. And he's going to be a guy that is going to get probably 15, 20 minutes a night, and is going to be expected to shoot at a pretty high rate right out of the gate. So I think it's a pretty well together put roster. They obviously have a ton of other freshmen who probably aren't all going to play this year. I expect Knuppel, Mulawet, God, I can't say his name, Mulawet, whatever, man. And then obviously Cooper Flagg to play the majority of the minutes for their freshmen. But those are my two X factors. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, in the ACC, I think they're squarely positioned on the top spot, and you look at the landscape of that conference, and it's Duke, and then even I would say a step lower, it's North Carolina, who we're going to talk about eventually,
Yep.
and then there's another step below, and then it's kind of the rest, in my eyes. So
Right.
I think you win the ACC, and then get a top 5 seed or whatever it is, and then at that point, it's what is Cooper Flagg? What are those freshman pieces at that point?
So in your mind, from what you've seen of Cooper Flagg and what you've heard of Cooper Flagg, what are your expectations in, I want to say year one, but it's going to be his only year at Duke. So
Right.
What are your expectations in terms of like what he will provide on the court? Where do you kind of see him from a scoring standpoint? What will he kind of average? What will be his impact on the defensive end? Like, what would be your set of expectations going into the season for probably the most hyped prospect since Zion Williamson, but maybe even going further back than that?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I think Cooper Flagg has like a smoothness to his game, like Devin Booker, just buttery, like a buttered biscuit, man. Just
Yeah.
His game is just so smooth, man. Like it's not herky jerky, but it has like a certain rhythm to it, and it's
Right.
his own. It's like his own unique flavor on like a Kevin Durant / Carmelo Anthony type of build, and I expect him to be solid on the offensive end at first, and then kind of come January, February, once we get into conference play, I think that's when he's going to really find his footing, though. I could see him starting out kind of hanging around 10 to 12 points and then kind of exploding further January, February, March when it really counts. And then defensively, I think he's going to be really good. I think that's going to be his stronger side of the ball at first. Even though I see all the highlights of his scoring, and there's definitely like a lot of natural scoring to his play as a whole. But I think,
I think expectations for Duke are right around what you said, except I think they're even a little higher. I think the expectation within that building, at least, will be to win the ACC, which they are favored to do, get like a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, maybe even top 2 seed, just with this talent. You'd expect a team like this to be better in March than it is in November. I think they'll get a top 2 or 3 seed in the NCAAs. And then the goal from there is to take it one game at a time. But the ultimate goal for this team is going to have to be get to the Final Four. It kind of feels like that's the final hurdle that they want to get to. And if you can do that in year 3 under John Shire, that would be a big accomplishment. Especially with some of the news that we got today that might make it, I don't want to say easier, but there are some implications of the news that we got earlier today, which we might get into here in a second. I don't know if you've heard it yet. But as I said, like, in order for that to happen, Tyrese Proctor has to be more consistent, especially from an offensive standpoint. And then you want like Caleb Foster, who's a sophomore shooting guard, to take another step with the extended minutes that he's going to get playing next to Tyrese Proctor. Obviously, he's a really talented player. But I just think where I think you can trust this Duke team a little bit more is the experience that they added to their bench unit. I think adding Sion James, even though it's a step up in competition, a guy that's played 4 years of college basketball, 14 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, as a taller, like capable defender on that end of the floor, who's a good shooter from 3, could be a key piece for them. And then, as I mentioned, Con Knuppel is going to be expected to kind of be like a shooting guard who spaces the floor and makes key shots at key moments as a freshman. And then you have a guy like Mason Gillis who will do the dirty work. He's a switchable 4, kind of a stretch 4 who can shoot it and can guard multiple positions. I think we're going to end up trusting this Duke team because of what they have coming off their bench. But the talent in the starting lineup, from Cooper Flagg to the 7-foot freshman center, who will be, I think, a sizable rim protector, to a hopefully another step up from Tyrese Proctor, will be a good combination. And they are the most talented team heading into this season in the ACC, and one of the most talented teams in America. So that's the expectation for Duke largely. Do you have any other parting shots for the Duke Blue Devils?
Just where will their head coach be at in terms of expectations going into the years beyond based on how he does this season? Because so far it's been like, okay, you recruited great and started off, I think, missing the tournament his first year, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, last year, the Elite Eight. So if he can continue to build on what they did last year, I think that's a storyline.
Yeah, I think what's good for college basketball is that this Duke team, whether you like them, you love them, or you hate them, they're going to be a national story every week. Not every team in college basketball, except for maybe one or two others that I can think of off the top of my head, will be national stories every single week. But because you have Cooper Flagg, because you have this freshman class, because you have a bunch of freshmen who will likely go to the draft after this year and will be NBA draft prospects, even a guy like Tyrese Proctor, who I expect to go after this year, they're going to be a national storyline because they're Duke. They're maybe you can argue the number one blue blood in college basketball, just in terms of their brand. And so that's that. Again, Final Four is the expectation, but at a minimum, you have to get to the second weekend, and you should win the ACC. I don't think that John Shire will be under any pressure necessarily in terms of his job if things go haywire this year, but it depends on how bad it gets. I don't expect that to be any kind of problem, though. That's about it on Duke. Real fast, before we wrap this segment up for our Duke basketball preview, did you hear the news earlier today? Major breaking news in college basketball? Or do you want me to break it to you now?
Yeah, go ahead and tell me. I don't think I heard of this.
Okay, well, the reason I bring it up now is because it applies big time to the ACC. Obviously, you know that there are 3 new programs in the ACC this year. Cal, SMU, and Stanford, right? Earlier today, right as I was leaving work, Jeff Goodman of the Field of 68, out of the blue, on a Thursday afternoon, reported that, again, 20 days away from the season starting for this particular program, that Virginia head coach Tony Bennett is retiring effective immediately. So, national championship winning coach who's built a fantastic program at Virginia, one of the coach faces of college basketball, one of the remaining coaches that have actually won a title. He is retiring effective immediately and will hold a press conference tomorrow in Charlottesville to basically explain his retirement. Now, the first thing that came to my mind was, boy, is there some sort of health issue here? Because the timing is just off, right? You wouldn't expect a head coach like Tony Bennett to retire less than 3 weeks before the season. Because at this point, you'd think, okay, he's all in. And if he's going to announce something, you would think it would be, this is going to be my last year coaching, right? But it is effective immediately. So I thought, okay, hopefully this is not, maybe it could be as an explanation, but hopefully this isn't some sort of health issue. Obviously, we hope the best for Tony and his dad. Hopefully something's not going on in his family. Hopefully something's not wrong with him. But it was reported 20 minutes later that he's not dealing with any sort of health issue, or this isn't because of a health issue. So the speculation has been, and I kind of compare it to Nick Saban's retirement, that the changing landscape in college basketball, from NIL to the transfer portal, to having to deal with all these agents nowadays, just keeping up with the times has kind of caught up to Tony Bennett. Because Virginia, even though they won that national championship, they don't have the resources from an NIL standpoint that a lot of these other programs do. And the playing field has been leveled from that standpoint. So I think Tony Bennett will obviously eloquently explain the reasons for which he is making this decision tomorrow, and I'll be interested to hear the decision. But I am just kind of stunned by not the decision itself, because there were rumblings that this could happen at some point sometime soon, that he could retire. But the timing of it is just kind of stunning. But it's huge news in college basketball, so I wanted to get your reaction to it.
Yeah, that's super shocking. I just would have never saw this coming, man. Dang. It's just so close to the season, and it's kind of like that. They're starting training camps, right? They're already practicing. The games are in less than a month, so 2 weeks from the season. Yeah, something definitely happened that was just a sudden change in dynamic that he didn't want to deal with. There's something there.
Yeah. So again, a national championship winning coach. I'll just real quick remind you guys of the accolades, and then we'll talk about this more later on in the season. But obviously, he brought Virginia from humiliation, losing to the 16 seed as a 1 seed for the first time ever to UMBC back in the the 2018 season, and then after the year after, the incredible story that is the Virginia basketball run, going and winning that 2019 national championship the year after losing to a 16 seed. But he ends his career 433 and 169. He's a 2-time Naismith National Coach of the Year, 4-time ACC Coach of the Year, a 2007 Pac-10 Coach of the Year, back before he was hired at Virginia at Washington State, obviously Coach Klay Thompson, and then a 6-time ACC regular season champion, a 2-time ACC tournament champion. So he had a Hall of Fame career. I think it's 18 years as a college basketball head coach, so a pretty lengthy career as well. And he built Virginia into a national staying power in college basketball. They had an incredible 5 to 6 year run where they were not only winning ACC championships, but they were getting high seeds in the tournament. They were putting guys in the NBA. You think about all the guys that Tony Bennett put into the NBA. I mean, you can just name them off right now. Joe Harris, Malcolm Brogdon, all the guys from that championship-winning team.
DeAndre Hunter.
Kyle Guy, like Ty Jerome. The list goes on, right? So I think NIL and transfer portal, even though he might not say it outright, had a lot to do with this. And I think to some extent, it's had a lot to do with some of the other like coaching retirements that we've seen over the past year or two. Jim Boeheim. I don't know about Coach K to that extent because Duke was doing fine in that department. But like even going over to football, Nick Saban. It's kind of been reported at this point and known that that was part of it. So that's it on this ACC episode of our college basketball previews. Right around the 25-minute mark, right where I want it to end up. We previewed Duke. We gave you our X factors. We talked about their transfer additions. We talked about their freshman class. We gave them a grade. I give them a B+ for their transfer class. I give them an A overall for their newcomers, freshmen and transfers. And I expect that they will not only win the ACC, barring some bad injuries, but they will also at least be a second weekend team, get a high seed in the tournament, and compete for a Final Four in year 3 under John Shire. So if you like this video, make sure you leave us a like, subscribe to our channel. There are lots more college basketball previews coming your way over the next week or two. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. We'll be back here pretty soon with a Week 8 college football preview. Peace out.